The heat shimmered off the desert floor like water boiling in an invisible pot, and Lily Richardson thought she was hallucinating when she saw the man sprawled beside the dried creek bed, his horse nowhere in sight and buzzards already circling overhead. She pulled her mare to a stop, squinting against the relentless Montana sun that had been beating down on her for 3 days straight. The journey from Bannack to visit her aunt in Virginia City should have taken 2 days, but she had gotten turned around in the maze of canyons and valleys that characterized this unforgiving territory. Now her water was running low, her supplies nearly depleted, and here was a man who looked worse off than she felt. Common sense told her to keep riding. This was 1875, and the Montana Territory was no place for a 22-year-old woman alone to be taking chances. But her conscience would not let her pass by without at least checking if he was alive. She dismounted, her legs stiff from hours in the saddle, and approached cautiously. The man was face down in the dirt, his dark hair matted with blood, his clothes torn and dust-covered. A revolver lay several feet away, as if it had been thrown or knocked from his grasp. When she knelt beside him and pressed her fingers to his neck, she felt a faint pulse fluttering beneath his sun-scorched skin. "Sir, can you hear me?" Her voice sounded strange in the vast silence, swallowed up by the empty landscape around them. He groaned, which was at least a sign of life. With effort, Lily managed to turn him onto his back. He was younger than she had expected, perhaps 24 or 25, with a strong jaw now covered in several days' worth of stubble. Blood had dried on his temple from a nasty gash, and his lips were cracked and bleeding from dehydration. She should save her water. She needed it to survive. But looking at this man's face, seeing the way his chest rose and fell in shallow, desperate breaths, she knew she could not leave him to die. Lily retrieved her canteen from her saddle and returned to his side. Lifting his head carefully, she brought the canteen to his lips and let a small amount of water trickle into his mouth. He coughed at first, then his survival instinct kicked in and he began to swallow greedily. "Slowly," she cautioned, pulling the canteen back. "Too much at once will make you sick." She gave him another small drink, then another, monitoring his reaction. His eyes fluttered open, revealing irises the color of aged whiskey, golden brown with flecks of green. They focused on her face with confusion and what might have been wonder. "Am I dead?" His voice was barely a rasp. "Not yet, but you are well on your way if we do not get you some help." Lily poured a bit of water onto her handkerchief and dabbed at the wound on his head. "What happened to you?" "Ambushed." He winced as she cleaned the cut. "3 men, wanted my horse and whatever money I had, left me for dead." "They nearly succeeded." She helped him take another sip. "Can you sit up?" With her assistance, he managed to prop himself against a boulder. Now that some color was returning to his face, she could see he was actually quite handsome beneath the dirt and blood. He watched her with those unusual eyes as she continued to share her precious water with him. "You are wasting your supply on me," he said, though he did not refuse when she offered him more. "I could not live with myself if I rode past and left you to die." Lily sat back on her heels, assessing him. "Do you think you can ride? My horse can carry us both if we go slowly. I do not even know your name, and you are saving my life." He attempted a smile, though it looked painful. "I am Harrison Sutherland, Lily Richardson. And I am only doing what anyone decent would do. You would be surprised how many people are not decent when their own survival is at stake." He accepted her help to stand, swaying dangerously. Lily wedged herself under his arm, supporting his weight as best she could. He was tall and solid with muscle despite his ordeal, and it took considerable effort to get him to her horse. The mare, bless her patient soul, stood still as they approached. Getting Harrison into the saddle was an awkward affair that left them both breathing hard, but eventually he was settled and Lily climbed up behind him, one arm around his waist to keep him steady. "Where were you headed?" she asked, turning her horse back toward the main trail. "Bannack. I have business there. That is where I live. We are about a day's ride out, but in your condition and with both of us on one horse, it might take longer." She felt him sag against her, his body giving in to exhaustion now that immediate survival was no longer solely his responsibility. "Stay awake, Harrison. I need you to stay awake." "Talking helps," he mumbled. "Tell me about yourself, Lily Richardson." So she did. As they rode through the afternoon heat, she told him about growing up in Bannack, about her father who ran the general store and her mother who had passed from fever 3 years earlier. She told him about her younger brother who had gone east to study law, and her aunt who lived in Virginia City and had been expecting her 2 days ago. Harrison listened, occasionally asking questions that let her know he was still conscious. As the sun began its descent toward the western horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold, he began to share his own story. He was from Texas originally, had come north after the war looking for opportunities. He worked as a ranch hand, a scout, whatever honest work he could find. He had saved enough money to buy some land near Bannack and was planning to start his own small ranch. The money from his savings had been in his saddlebags when he was attacked. "Everything I worked for gone," he said, and she heard the defeat in his voice. "You are alive. That is more valuable than money." Lily adjusted her hold on him as the horse picked its way down a rocky slope. "You can earn money again. You only get one life. You sound like you have experience with loss. Everyone does out here. This land takes as much as it gives." She paused, then added, "But it also teaches you what truly matters: family, kindness, staying human in a place that can make you hard." They fell into silence as dusk approached. Lily knew they needed to make camp soon, but she wanted to cover as much distance as possible while Harrison was still conscious. She could feel him struggling to stay awake, feel the way his body fought against the need to rest. "Keep talking to me," she urged. "Tell me about this ranch you want to start." His voice was dreamy as he described it, slurred with fatigue but full of passion. "A small place, just enough cattle to make a living. A house with a porch where a person could sit and watch the sunset. Maybe some chickens, a good dog, a life that was simple but his own." He talked about breeding horses too, selling them to the cavalry or to other ranchers. He had a good eye for horseflesh, he said, and knew how to train them right. When his voice finally trailed off and his weight became heavier against her, Lily knew she needed to stop. They had reached a spot where some scrub trees provided minimal cover, and there was enough dried brush to make a small fire. She managed to dismount without letting Harrison fall from the saddle, then carefully helped him down. He was barely conscious as she laid him out on the ground, his body finally giving in to the trauma it had endured. Working quickly in the fading light, Lily unsaddled her horse and set up a basic camp. She had some jerky and hardtack in her supplies, not much but enough. Her canteen was now less than a quarter full. They would need to find water tomorrow or they would both be in serious trouble. She built a small fire as the temperature began to drop. The desert that had been mercilessly hot during the day would be cold at night, and Harrison needed warmth. She checked his wound again, relieved to see it had stopped bleeding. The gash was not as deep as she had feared. Though he definitely had a concussion through the night, she kept watch, feeding the fire and checking on Harrison periodically. He was restless, sometimes muttering in his sleep, caught in fever dreams she could not decipher. When he grew too cold, she lay down beside him, sharing her body heat and the single blanket she had brought. It was improper, certainly, but propriety meant little when survival was at stake. Somewhere in the small hours before dawn, he woke with a start, gasping. Lily was immediately alert, her hand on his shoulder. "You are safe," she said quietly. "It is just a dream." He turned his head toward her, his eyes reflecting the dying firelight. "You are real. Part of me thought I imagined you. I am very real, and you are going to be fine. Rest now. We have a long ride tomorrow." But he did not rest. Instead, he looked at her with an intensity that made her breath catch. "Why did you stop, really? You could have kept riding." Lily considered her answer carefully. "Because I have passed by too many things in my life, Harrison Sutherland. Too many moments where I chose the easy path, the safe path. My mother used to say that we are defined by what we do when no one is watching, when there is no reward except knowing we did right. I suppose I stopped because I wanted to be the kind of person she raised me to be." He reached up with effort and touched her face, his calloused fingers gentle against her cheek. "I will repay this debt. I swear to you, Lily Richardson, I will spend the rest of my life repaying what you did for me today. You owe me nothing, just get well." But even as she said it, something passed between them in that moment, something neither of them could name but both of them felt. A connection forged in the crucible of survival, fragile as new spring growth, but with the potential to become something strong. He drifted back to sleep, and Lily sat awake, watching the stars wheel overhead and wondering what she had set in motion by choosing compassion over caution. They reached Bannack the following afternoon. Harrison was stronger, able to sit upright in the saddle on his own, though Lily kept a steadying hand on his back. The town emerged from the landscape like a promise, its buildings clustered along Grasshopper Creek, smoke rising from chimneys and the sound of hammers and voices carrying on the wind. People stopped to stare as they rode down the main street, a dust-covered woman and an injured man sharing a tired horse. Lily guided them directly to Dr. Palmer's office, a small building next to the general store that happened to be owned by her father. The doctor, a gruff man in his 50s who had seen every kind of injury and illness the frontier could produce, helped Harrison inside and onto the examination table. Lily waited in the outer room, suddenly aware of how exhausted she was, how her hands were shaking now that the immediate danger had passed. Her father appeared in the doorway, his weathered face creased with worry. Thomas Richardson was a tall man, made stooped by years of hard work, with gray threading through his dark hair and kind eyes that had grown sad since his wife's death. "Lily, thank God. Your aunt sent word 2 days ago asking if you had arrived. We have been worried sick." He pulled her into a tight embrace. "What happened?" She told him the story while they waited for Dr. Palmer to finish examining Harrison. Her father listened without interrupting, his expression moving from concern to something like pride. "Your mother would have done the same," he said quietly. "Foolish, maybe, but right." Dr. Palmer emerged, wiping his hands on a cloth. "He will live. Concussion, dehydration, exposure, and that gash needed stitches, but he is tough. He needs rest, proper food, and plenty of water." "Lily, you likely saved his life getting him here when you did." "He can stay with us," her father said immediately. "We have the spare room since Daniel left for school. He should not be alone while he recovers." Lily felt a rush of gratitude for her father's generosity, even as a small voice in her head questioned the wisdom of having Harrison Sutherland under their roof. She barely knew him, after all. But when she went in to check on him and saw him lying there, cleaned up now with his head properly bandaged, looking vulnerable and lost, she knew her father's offer was the right one. Harrison's eyes opened as she approached. "I heard. Your father is very kind. He is a good man. And you need somewhere to recover." She pulled a chair close to the examination table. "Dr. Palmer says you are going to be fine. Thanks to you." He caught her hand, his grip surprisingly strong. "I meant what I said last night, Lily. I owe you everything." "You owe me nothing," she repeated, but this time the words felt less certain. Because looking into those whiskey-colored eyes, feeling the warmth of his hand around hers, she was beginning to understand that something had fundamentally shifted in her world. She had set out on a simple journey to visit her aunt, and had returned with a stranger who no longer felt like a stranger at all. The next few weeks passed in a rhythm that became increasingly comfortable. Harrison stayed in the spare room upstairs, and each day he grew stronger. At first he could barely make it down the stairs for meals, but gradually his strength returned. The gash on his head healed to a red line that would likely leave a small scar, a permanent reminder of his brush with death. Lily found herself drawn to his company in ways that both thrilled and frightened her. They would sit on the front porch of the general store in the evenings after her father closed up, watching Bannack go about its business. Harrison would tell her stories about Texas, about the war, though he did not like to dwell on those memories, about the places he had been and the things he had seen. In turn, she shared more about her life, her dreams, her grief over losing her mother. "She sounds like she was remarkable," Harrison said one evening as the sun set behind the mountains, painting everything in shades of purple and gold. She was strong in a way that had nothing to do with physical strength. She could make anyone feel welcome, like they mattered. The town felt her loss. Lily pulled her shawl tighter against the cool air. "I have tried to be like her, but I always feel like I fall short. You saved a dying stranger and asked nothing in return. I think you are more like her than you realize." He was quiet for a moment, then added, "I need to tell you something. I have been imposing on your father's hospitality for 3 weeks now. I need to start paying my way, earning my keep. You are still recovering. I am strong enough to work. Your father mentioned needing help with inventory at the store, heavy lifting and such. It is not much, but it is a start." He turned to look at her directly. "I cannot start my ranch without money. Those thieves took everything, so I will work, save, and start over. It will take longer than I planned, but I will do it. What about your land? The property you were going to buy?" His jaw tightened. "Someone else likely bought it by now. I will find another piece. The territory is full of land." Lily heard the disappointment beneath his practical words. She wanted to help, wanted to fix this for him, but she had no means to do so. Her father ran a successful store, but they were not wealthy. They had enough and no more. "I am sorry," she said, feeling the inadequacy of the words. "Do not be. I am alive because of you. Land can be bought. Life cannot be restored." He stood, stretching carefully. "I should turn in. Your father wants me to help unload a supply wagon tomorrow morning." He paused at the door, looking back at her. "Lily, I know I have said this before, but I need you to understand. Everything I am now, everything I will be in the future, started the moment you gave me water when you could have kept riding. You gave me a future when I had none. I will not forget that. Ever." Before she could respond, he went inside, leaving her alone with the darkening sky and a heart that was beating far too fast. Her father noticed, of course. Thomas Richardson had not raised a daughter without learning to read her moods and expressions. One morning, about a month after Harrison had come to stay with them, he asked Lily to take a walk with him before the store opened. They walked along Grasshopper Creek, watching the water flow over rocks that glinted with the gold that had first brought people to this place. The mining boom had faded, but Bannack persisted, evolving into a supply town for ranchers and travelers. "He is a good man," her father said without preamble. Lily felt heat rise to her cheeks. "Who? Do not play coy with me, daughter. Harrison Sutherland." He is honest, hardworking, and I have seen the way he looks at you." Thomas picked up a smooth stone and tossed it into the water. "I have also seen the way you look at him. Father, you do not need to explain yourself to me. Your mother and we knew within a week of meeting that we were meant for each other. Sometimes these things are just clear." He turned to face her, his expression serious. "But I need to know his intentions are honorable. You saved his life, Lily. I would not want him to feel obligated to court you out of some misguided sense of debt. He does not." But even as she said it, doubt crept in. Was that what this was? Harrison feeling like he owed her. The thought made her stomach twist. "Talk to him," her father advised. "Be honest about your feelings, whatever they are. Life is too short and too uncertain out here for anything less than honesty." That evening, Lily asked Harrison to take a walk with her. They headed out of town toward a small hill that overlooked the valley, a place where she used to go with her mother when she needed to think or pray or simply breathe. The October air was crisp, with the promise of winter coming. In another month, snow would blanket the mountains and life would slow to the rhythm of cold and survival. But tonight, the world felt suspended in that perfect moment between seasons, holding its breath. "There is something I need to ask you," Lily said when they reached the top of the hill and stood looking out over the valley bathed in twilight. "And I need you to be completely honest with me." Harrison tensed beside her. "Of course." She gathered her courage, forcing herself to meet his eyes. "Do you feel obligated to spend time with me because I helped you? Is that what this is? Some sense of debt you think you need to repay?" He stared at her for a long moment, and she watched emotions flicker across his face too quickly to identify. Then, without warning, he cupped her face in his hands and kissed her. It was not a gentle kiss, or a tentative one. It was the kiss of a man who had been holding back and could not do so any longer. Lily's surprise lasted only a heartbeat before she responded, her arms coming up to circle his neck, her body pressing against his as the world spun away and left only this, only them, only the truth of what they both felt. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Harrison rested his forehead against hers. "Does that feel like obligation to you?" His voice was rough with emotion. "Lily, from the moment I opened my eyes and saw your face, I was lost. You think I stayed at your father's house just because I needed a place to recover. I could have found a room at the boarding house after the first week. I stayed because I could not bear the thought of not seeing you every day. Harrison, I am in love with you." The words came out fierce and certain. "I have been for weeks now. I tried to fight it, told myself it was too soon, that I was confusing gratitude with something deeper. But it is not gratitude, Lily. It is love. You are brave and kind and beautiful, and when I imagine my future now, you are in every part of it." Tears spilled down her cheeks, but they were happy tears. "I love you too. I have been so afraid to admit it, so scared that you would say it was just gratitude or obligation on your part." He kissed her again, softer this time, tender and full of promise. "No obligation, just love, the truest thing I have ever felt." They stood there as the stars began to appear overhead, holding each other and talking about the future in ways that were no longer abstract. Harrison spoke of his dream ranch, but now Lily was in that vision, standing beside him on that porch watching the sunset. Lily talked about her hopes of having a family, children who would grow up strong and free in this wild land. And Harrison was in those dreams too, teaching sons and daughters to ride and rope, and respect the life they were given. "I have nothing to offer you right now," Harrison said, worry creeping into his voice. "No land, no house, barely enough saved to buy a decent horse. It could take me years to build what I want to give you." "I do not need years," Lily said firmly. I need you. The rest we will build together. Your father deserves better for you than a man who has to start from nothing. My father wants me to be happy, and you make me happy." She pulled back enough to look at him properly. "Harrison, do you want to marry me or not?" he laughed, the sound full of joy and relief. "More than I have ever wanted anything, but I want to do this right. I need to talk to your father, ask his permission properly, and I want to have something to offer you, even if it is just the beginning of something. Then we will wait a little while longer, but not too long." She kissed him again, reveling in the freedom of being able to do so now without guilt or confusion. "I have waited 22 years to feel like this. I do not want to wait forever." Over the next several months, Harrison worked harder than Lily had ever seen anyone work. He continued helping at the general store, but he also took on additional jobs around town. He helped repair the roof on the church, worked at the livery stable, did carpentry and any other odd job that would pay. He was saving every penny, and Lily knew he was doing it for them, for their future. She watched him with a mixture of admiration and impatience. She understood his desire to have something to offer her, but she wished he could see that he was already everything she needed. Still, she respected his determination and used the time to prepare herself as well. She helped her father more at the store, learning the business side of things that she had never paid much attention to before. If she was going to be a rancher's wife, she needed to understand accounts and inventory and negotiation. Winter came and settled over Bannack like a heavy blanket. The mountains disappeared behind veils of snow, and the temperature dropped so low that water froze in the basins overnight. But inside the Richardson house, there was warmth. Harrison had become like a son to Thomas, and the three of them formed a small, contented family unit that carried them through the darkest months. On Christmas Eve, after they had finished a simple dinner and were sitting around the stove drinking coffee, Harrison cleared his throat nervously. "Thomas, sir, there is something I need to discuss with you." Lily's heart began to race. She looked at her father and saw that he was smiling, the first real smile she had seen since her mother's death. "I believe I know what this is about," Thomas said, "and before you ask, the answer is yes. You have my blessing to marry my daughter if she will have you." Harrison looked at Lily, his eyes shining. "I was trying to do this formally." "Do it then," Thomas said, still smiling. "Do not let me stop you." Harrison stood and moved to where Lily sat. To her surprise, he actually got down on one knee, taking her hand in his. "Lily Richardson, I know I am not the match your father probably imagined for you. I have no family name, no inheritance, no grand estate to offer. What I have is love, determination, and a promise. I promise to work every day to build us a life. I promise to honor and cherish you. I promise that everything I am and everything I will become is yours. Will you marry me?" "Yes." The word came out choked with tears. "Yes, of course, yes." He pulled a small box from his pocket and opened it to reveal a simple gold band. "It is not much, but it is real gold. I wanted you to have something that would last. It is perfect." She let him slide it onto her finger, marveling at how right it felt to have it there. "You are perfect." They married in early spring, as soon as the worst of the winter had passed and the first flowers began to push through the thawing ground. The ceremony was held in the small church in Bannack, attended by everyone in town. Lily wore her mother's wedding dress, altered to fit her, and carried wildflowers that Harrison had ridden out to pick at dawn. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Harrison kissed her with a tenderness that made her forget anyone else was watching. This was their moment, the beginning of the future they had both dreamed of. They moved into a small cabin on the edge of town that Thomas had helped them rent. It was modest, just 2 rooms and a loft, but it was theirs. Harrison continued working multiple jobs while searching for the right piece of land to buy. He had saved enough for a small down payment, but he was particular about what he wanted. It had to have water access, good grazing, and be close enough to town that Lily would not be isolated. In early summer, he found it. 30 acres about 5 miles south of Bannack, with a creek running through it and views that took Lily's breath away when he first brought her to see it. There was no house, no barn, nothing but raw land and possibility. But standing there with Harrison's arms around her, looking out over what would be theirs, Lily could see it all. She could see the house they would build, the corrals, the cattle grazing on the hillsides. She could see their future taking shape like a photograph developing in solution. They bought the land with a combination of Harrison's savings and a loan from the bank. Thomas offered to help, but Harrison politely declined, determined to do this on his own merit. Lily loved him for his pride, even as she sometimes wished he would be more willing to accept help. Building the ranch became the focus of their lives. Harrison worked during the day at various jobs in town, then spent his evenings and weekends on their land, clearing brush and preparing to build. Lily worked alongside him whenever she could, though she also continued helping her father at the store. They were building two things simultaneously, a ranch and a marriage. Both required patience, hard work, and faith that the effort would be worth it. On a warm evening in July, they stood together looking at the foundation they had laid for their future house. It was not much yet, just stones and timber marking out where the walls would go, but it was a start. "Sometimes I think about that day in the desert," Harrison said, his arm around Lily's waist. "How close I came to dying there, and then I think about everything that has happened since, and it feels impossible, like someone else's life." "But it is your life," Lily said, leaning into him. "It is our life, because you shared your water with a dying stranger." He turned her to face him. "I told you that day that I would repay the debt, that I would give you my entire future. Did you think I was just talking? I never wanted repayment, Harrison. You know that." "I know. But I wanted to give it anyway." He gestured to the land around them. "This is your ranch as much as mine. More than mine, if I am being honest, because none of it exists without you. I exist because of you." "We exist because of each other now," she corrected. "That is what marriage means." He kissed her as the sun set behind them, painting their shadows long across the land they were claiming as their own. Tomorrow they would work again, and the day after, and the day after that. It would take time to build what they wanted, but they had time now. They had a future, bought with a gift of water in the desert and paid for with love. By September, they had the basic structure of a house completed. It was small, just 3 rooms and a loft, but it was solid and tight against the weather. Harrison had learned carpentry working odd jobs, and his work was careful and precise. Every board, every nail was placed with thought and care. This was not just shelter. It was a home for the family they planned to build. Lily's aunt came from Virginia City to visit and declared the house charming. Thomas came regularly, bringing supplies from the store and helping with projects that required more than 2 pairs of hands. Slowly, their ranch began to take shape. They built a small barn, bought 3 horses and a dozen head of cattle with money Harrison had continued to save. It was a modest start, but it was a start. Their first winter in the house was harsh. Snow piled up around the walls and wind howled through cracks they had not realized existed. But they kept each other warm, and Lily found she had never been happier. Waking up in Harrison's arms, working beside him during the day, falling asleep to his heartbeat at night, this was the life she had dreamed of without knowing she was dreaming it. In January, she discovered she was pregnant. She told Harrison on a Sunday afternoon when they were alone in the house, watching snow fall outside the window. He was so surprised he nearly dropped the cup of coffee he was holding. "Are you certain?" His voice was full of wonder. "As certain as I can be without seeing Dr. Palmer." "But yes, I am certain." She took his hand and placed it on her still flat stomach. "We are going to have a baby." He pulled her into his arms and she felt him trembling. When he spoke, his voice was thick with emotion. "I never thought I would have this. A wife who loves me, land to call my own, and now a child. It is more than I ever dreamed possible." "You deserve it all," Lily said firmly. "You are a good man, Harrison Sutherland. You have worked so hard for everything we have. You deserve every bit of happiness that comes your way." The pregnancy progressed smoothly through the winter and into spring. Lily continued working as much as she could, though Harrison became increasingly protective, not wanting her to overdo things. She found his concern endearing even when it was excessive. In early August, on a day so hot that they had given up on outdoor work and were resting in the shade of the house, Lily's labor began. Harrison rode to town to fetch Dr. Palmer and her father, then paced outside the bedroom like a caged animal while the doctor and a neighbor woman who had experience with births attended to Lily. The labor was long and difficult. More than once, Harrison heard Lily cry out in pain and had to restrain himself from bursting into the room. His hands were shaking, and he found himself praying to a God he had not talked to much since the war. Just before dawn, a baby's cry pierced the air. Harrison froze, waiting for what felt like an eternity until the neighbor woman opened the door, smiling. "You have a son," she announced. "A healthy boy, and your wife is fine." Harrison entered the room to find Lily propped up against pillows, exhausted but beaming, holding a tiny bundle. Dr. Palmer had packed up his instruments and was washing his hands in a basin. "She did wonderfully," the doctor said. "Both mother and baby are strong and healthy. You are a lucky man, Harrison." Harrison barely heard him. He was focused entirely on Lily and the baby in her arms. He approached slowly, almost afraid, as if too much enthusiasm might break the spell. "Come meet your son," Lily said softly. He sat on the edge of the bed and looked down at the tiny face, red and wrinkled and absolutely perfect. The baby's eyes were closed, his little fists waving in the air. Harrison felt something crack open in his chest, a rush of love so powerful it was almost painful. "What should we name him?" Lily asked. They had discussed names but had not settled on anything. Now, looking at his son, Harrison knew. "Thomas," he said, "after your father. For everything he did for us, for believing in me when he had no reason to." Tears spilled down Lily's cheeks. "He will love that. Thomas Sutherland. It is perfect." Harrison carefully took the baby from Lily, cradling him with a gentleness he had not known he possessed. The baby opened his eyes, revealing dark blue irises that would likely change color as he grew. He looked up at his father with an unfocused gaze, and Harrison felt his own eyes burn with tears. "I am going to give you everything," he whispered to his son. "Everything I never had. A home, land, parents who love each other. You will never doubt that you are wanted, that you matter. I promise you that." Thomas Richardson the elder arrived an hour later and wept openly when he held his grandson. "Your mother would have been so proud," he said to Lily, his voice breaking. "Of you, of your family, of everything you have built." The weeks after Thomas's birth were a blur of sleepless nights and endless wonder. Lily recovered quickly, her strength surprising even Dr. Palmer. The baby was healthy and grew rapidly, his appetite voracious. Harrison found himself watching his son for hours, marveling at every expression, every movement. The ranch work continued, though at a slower pace. Harrison hired a young man from town to help with the heavier tasks, allowing him to spend more time at the house with Lily and Thomas. They were building something more precious than a ranch now. They were building a family, a legacy. As autumn arrived and the leaves turned gold on the aspens dotting the hillsides, Harrison and Lily celebrated their first wedding anniversary. Thomas Richardson, the grandfather, insisted on watching the baby so the couple could have an evening alone. They rode out to a spot high on their property where they could see for miles in every direction. The sun was setting, painting the sky in colors that seemed impossible, too vivid to be real. They sat together on a blanket, Lily leaning back against Harrison's chest, his arms wrapped around her. "You ever think about that day?" Lily asked. "The day I found you." "Every day," Harrison said honestly. "How could I not? It was the day my life began. Your life began long before that." "No." He turned her gently so he could see her face. "I was existing before that, moving through days, surviving but not really living. You gave me life, Lily, not just by sharing your water but by seeing something in me worth saving. By believing I could be more than a dying stranger in the desert. You were always more than that, maybe, but you were the first person who made me believe it." He kissed her softly. "I promised you that day that I would give you my entire future. I need you to understand what that means. Every success we have, every acre we add to this ranch, every child we raise, every sunset we watch together, all of it is because you chose compassion over caution. All of it is your gift coming back to you multiplied." "It is our gift," Lily insisted. "Everything we have, we built together." "Together," Harrison agreed. "That is the best word. You and me together, building something that will outlast us both." They sat in silence, watching darkness creep across the valley as stars began to emerge. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote called out, and their cattle lowed softly in response. The sounds of their ranch, their home, their life. The years passed in a rhythm of seasons and growth. The ranch expanded as Harrison's careful management and Lily's business sense proved a powerful combination. They added more cattle, began breeding horses as Harrison had once dreamed, and became known throughout the territory for their quality stock and fair dealing. Thomas grew into a bright, energetic boy who loved the ranch and everything about it. By the time he was 4, he was following Harrison everywhere, a small shadow learning how to be a rancher. He had his mother's dark hair and his father's unusual whiskey-colored eyes, a perfect blend of both parents. When Thomas was 5, Lily gave birth to a daughter they named Catherine Rose, after both grandmothers. She was tiny and fierce, with lungs that could wake the entire household when she wanted attention. Harrison fell in love with her instantly, this small girl who looked at him with complete trust and adoration. 2 years later, another son arrived, whom they named Daniel after Lily's brother. The house that had once seemed adequate now felt cramped, so Harrison began planning an addition. More rooms, a larger kitchen, space for their growing family. Thomas Richardson, the elder, remained a constant presence in their lives, growing older but no less vital. He sold the general store eventually, and moved into a small house Harrison built for him on the ranch property. He loved being close to his grandchildren, teaching them things about Bannack's history and their grandmother's memory that Lily might have forgotten or never known. The ranch prospered. What had started as 30 acres grew to nearly 300, as Harrison carefully acquired adjacent properties. They employed several ranch hands now, and Lily managed the business side of things from an office Harrison built for her off the main house. The modest dream had become something larger, something that would provide for generations. But success did not change the core of who they were. Harrison still woke before dawn to check on the animals. Lily still worked alongside him when the season demanded it. They taught their children the value of hard work, honesty, and compassion. The story of how their parents met became a legend in the family, told and retold until every detail was etched in the children's memories. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Lily and Harrison stood on the porch of their now much larger house, watching the sunset just as Harrison had once imagined. Their children were playing in the yard, their laughter carrying on the evening breeze. Thomas Richardson dozed in a rocking chair nearby, a contented smile on his weathered face. "You remember what you said to me the night we got engaged?" Lily asked. "About having nothing to offer," Harrison laughed. "I was an idiot." "No, you were honest. You truly had nothing material to offer." She gestured at the ranch spread out before them. "But look at what we built from nothing. Look at what your determination and love created." "What our determination and love created," he corrected, pulling her close. "I never forget, Lily. Not for a single day. This all started because you gave water to a dying stranger. Everything we have, everything we are, flows from that moment of compassion." "I think it was meant to be," Lily said softly. "I think I was supposed to take that route, get lost, find you. I think we were meant to find each other." "I believe that too," he kissed her temple. "You gave me my entire future that day, my entire life. I spent the last 10 years trying to make sure that gift was not wasted." "You did not waste a single moment," Lily assured him. "You took what I gave you and built something beautiful. But Harrison, you need to understand something. You saved me too." He looked at her in surprise. "How?" "I was going through life doing what was expected, being safe and careful and proper. I had stopped taking chances, stopped believing in possibility. Then I found you and everything changed. Saving you reminded me that I could be brave. Loving you taught me that the greatest rewards come from the biggest risks." She smiled at him. "You think you owe me everything, but the truth is we saved each other. We gave each other futures we never would have had alone." As if to emphasize her point, little Catherine ran up onto the porch, demanding her father pick her up. Harrison obliged, swinging her into his arms as she giggled. Thomas followed, then Daniel, until Harrison was surrounded by his children, all talking at once, all competing for his attention. Lily watched her husband with their children and felt her heart swell with a love that still, after all these years, could catch her by surprise with its intensity. This was what she had given that dying stranger in the desert. Not just water, but a future. Children he would never have had, a ranch he would never have built, a life he would never have lived, and he had given her the same. A partnership built on mutual respect and devotion, children who were healthy and loved, a home that was more than she had ever imagined wanting. They had saved each other in that desert, in ways neither of them had understood at the time. Time continued its steady march, as it always does. The children grew, the ranch evolved, and Harrison and Lily grew older together. More grandchildren arrived as Thomas married a girl from Virginia City and started his own ranch on land his parents gave him. Catherine married a doctor who set up practice in Bannack, combining her medical knowledge with his formal training to serve the community. Daniel became a lawyer like his uncle, though he kept a small piece of the ranch to work on weekends, unable to fully leave the land that had shaped him. Through it all, Harrison and Lily remained the center of their growing family. They were the ones everyone came to for advice, for comfort, for stories about the old days. They were the proof that love could triumph over hardship, that compassion was never wasted, that a choice made in a moment could echo through generations. On a warm summer evening in 1905, 30 years after that fateful day in the desert, Harrison and Lily sat on their porch watching the sunset. They were both in their 50s now, their hair touched with gray, their faces lined with years of sun and wind and laughter. But the love in Harrison's eyes when he looked at his wife was unchanged, as fresh and fierce as the day he first kissed her on that hillside. "You have any regrets?" Lily asked, a question she had never posed before. Harrison thought for a long moment. "I regret the years before I met you. All that time I wasted, wandering without purpose. But everything after you, not a single regret. Not even the hard times. The drought of '92, when we almost lost everything. We did not lose it. We survived together. That is what matters." He took her hand, his calloused fingers intertwining with hers. "Lily, people spend their entire lives searching for what we have. Some never find it. I found it dying in the desert, and I have cherished it every day since. How could I regret any part of a journey that led me here?" Lily leaned her head on his shoulder. Content in a way she had not known was possible all those years ago, when she was a young woman setting out to visit her aunt. Life had taken her on a detour, and that detour had become her destination. "I love you," she said simply. "I love you too. Always have, always will." He kissed the top of her head. "You saved my life that day, and I have tried every day since to make that sacrifice worth it." "It was never a sacrifice," Lily said. "It was a gift. And you repaid it 1,000 times over by giving me this life, this family, this love." They sat in comfortable silence as the sun dipped below the horizon and the first stars appeared. In the house behind them, they could hear their grandchildren playing, the next generation of Sutherlands learning what it meant to belong to this land. The ranch would continue after they were gone, passed down through children who understood its value because they had been taught by parents who understood the miracle of their own existence. The years continued to pass, each one a gift, each one treasured. Harrison and Lily aged together with grace, their love deepening rather than fading with time. They faced losses. Thomas Richardson, the elder, passed peacefully in his sleep at 82, and Lily grieved hard for the father who had supported her dreams, even when they seemed impossible. They celebrated triumphs. The ranch became one of the most successful in the territory, and their children all thrived in their chosen paths. Through it all, they never forgot where it started. On each anniversary, they would ride out to a spot on their property that reminded them of the desert where they met. Sometimes they brought water and poured it on the ground as a libation to the luck or fate or providence that had brought them together. It was their private ritual, their acknowledgement that life could turn on the smallest moments, the simplest choices. When Harrison was 62 and Lily 60, they received word that the piece of land Harrison had originally hoped to buy, the property he lost because of the robbery, was for sale. The owner had died and his children wanted to sell. "Should we buy it?" Harrison asked Lily, spreading the deed information out on her office desk. "Why, we have plenty of land now. I know, but it was the first dream, remember, the property I lost." He looked at her with a boyish enthusiasm that made him look years younger. "It would be satisfying in a way, coming full circle." Lily studied the papers, then looked at her husband. He had given her everything he promised and more. If buying this land would bring him joy, then she wanted him to have it. "Buy it," she said. "Add it to our holdings, and let us give it to Thomas for his 30th birthday. He can expand his operation." Harrison's face lit up. "That is perfect, absolutely perfect." They bought the land, and when they gave the deed to their son, they told him the full story. How his father had been on his way to buy that very property when he was attacked. How his mother had found him dying in the desert. How their entire family existed because of water shared and love given freely. Thomas held the deed with reverence, understanding that he was holding more than property. He was holding history, legacy, proof that his parents' love story was not just romantic but foundational to everything their family had become. The seasons turned, and time, which had always seemed infinite in the beginning, began to feel more precious. Harrison and Lily knew they were in the autumn of their lives, and they savored each day with the appreciation of people who understood how easily it all could have been different. They made plans for when they were gone. The ranch would be divided among their children, the house left to Thomas as the eldest. Their business affairs were carefully organized, debts paid, relationships mended if they needed mending. They wanted to leave their children with assets, but also with peace, with the security of knowing their parents' house was in order. On a spring morning in 1912, Harrison woke with Lily in his arms, the sun streaming through the bedroom window of the house he had built with his own hands. He was 69 years old, still strong but feeling his age now in ways he could not ignore. Lily was 67, her dark hair now silver, her face lined but still beautiful to him. "Good morning," she murmured, opening her eyes. "Good morning, my love." He kissed her softly. "Should we get up, or should we be scandalous and stay in bed all morning?" she laughed, the sound still musical after all these years. "When did you become scandalous?" "The day I met you. You corrupted me with your compassion and your canteen." They did get up eventually, dressing and going downstairs to breakfast. The house was quiet. It was just the two of them now that the children had their own homes, though grandchildren visited frequently enough that it never felt truly empty. After breakfast, they took a walk around the ranch, checking on things as they had done every morning for decades. The spring grass was lush, the cattle healthy, the horses spirited in the corrals. Everything was as it should be, the result of years of careful stewardship. "I have been thinking," Harrison said as they paused by a fence overlooking the valley, "about that day in the desert. I wonder sometimes what would have happened if you had kept riding." "Do not," Lily said quickly. "Do not torture yourself with hypotheticals." "I am not torturing myself. I am marveling. One decision, one moment of compassion, and an entire world changed. Our children exist because you stopped, our grandchildren. Everything we built, it all hinges on that moment. Then I am grateful I made the right choice. So am I." He pulled her close, breathing in the scent of her hair, still familiar after all these years. So incredibly grateful. They stood there for a long time, two people who had found each other against all odds and built a life that exceeded their wildest dreams. The future they had created together stretched out behind them in the form of children and grandchildren, and ahead of them in the legacy they would leave. As they walked back to the house, Lily said, "Promise me something. Anything. When we are gone, tell the children to remember the water. Remember that compassion matters, that stopping for someone in need is never wasted effort. Our entire family exists because of that lesson. I want it to be our legacy, more than the land or the money. Compassion is what matters." "I promise," Harrison said solemnly. "Though I hope we are not talking about being gone for many years yet." "I hope so too. But whenever it is, that is what I want remembered, not how much land we owned or how successful the ranch was. I want people to remember that we loved each other, that we chose kindness, that we built something beautiful from nothing because we were willing to help each other." Harrison stopped walking and took both of her hands in his. "You are an extraordinary woman, Lily Sutherland. You always have been. And I promise you, our family will remember. They will tell the story of the canteen to their children and grandchildren. It will be part of our family history, the moment everything began." They shared a kiss there in the morning sunlight, two people who had beaten the odds and found something rare and precious. Their love story would outlive them, passed down through generations as proof that small acts of kindness could change the world, one life at a time. Years continued to accumulate like layers of sediment, each one adding to the foundation of the Sutherland family legacy. Harrison and Lily remained active well into their 70s, still riding out to check on cattle, still sitting on their porch at sunset, still holding hands like newlyweds. Their golden wedding anniversary came in 1925, 50 years since that spring day when they had married in the small church in Bannack. Their children organized a massive celebration, inviting seemingly everyone in Montana. The ranch house overflowed with family and friends, 3 generations of Sutherlands gathering to honor the couple whose love had started it all. During the party, Thomas stood to give a speech. He was 52 now, a successful rancher himself, with gray threading through his hair and his father's steady presence. He raised his glass and waited for silence. 50 years ago today, my parents stood in front of God and this community and promised to love each other for the rest of their lives. But their story really began a year before that, in the desert, when my mother made a choice that would define all of our lives. He told the story then, the familiar tale that every member of the family knew by heart but never tired of hearing. How Lily had found Harrison dying in the sun. How she had shared her water when she barely had enough for herself. How Harrison had promised to give her his entire future. And he kept that promise, Thomas said, his voice thick with emotion. Everything we have, everything we are, exists because of that moment of compassion. My father worked every day of his life to build something worthy of the gift my mother gave him. He built this ranch, he built a family, he built a legacy of integrity and love that will continue long after they are gone. He raised his glass higher. To Harrison and Lily Sutherland, the proof that love is real, that compassion matters, and that a good man keeps his promises. May we all be so fortunate. The crowd erupted in cheers and applause. Harrison stood and pulled Lily to her feet, kissing her in front of everyone as their children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren cheered. It was a perfect moment, the culmination of 50 years of love and partnership. That night, after everyone had finally gone home or to bed, Harrison and Lily sat alone on their porch one more time. The ranch was quiet under a blanket of stars, peaceful in a way that felt earned rather than given. "Did I do it?" Harrison asked quietly. "Did I make good on my promise?" Lily looked at him in surprise. "You are asking me this after 50 years. I need to know. I promised you my entire future that day. Did I give you enough?" She took his weathered hand in hers, these hands that had built so much, worked so hard, loved so well. "You gave me more than enough. You gave me everything. A life I never imagined, a love I never thought to find, children and grandchildren who carry the best of both of us forward. You more than kept your promise, Harrison Sutherland. You exceeded it in every way." He let out a breath he seemed to have been holding for 50 years. "Good. That is all I ever wanted, to be worthy of what you gave me. You were always worthy. From the moment I saw you, you were worthy." She leaned her head on his shoulder, comfortable and familiar. "We saved each other in that desert, remember? This future you gave me, I gave it to you too. We built it together." They sat in silence, 2 souls intertwined so completely that neither could imagine existence without the other. The future they had worried about in the beginning, the one Harrison had promised to give her, had become the past they cherished. And the present was still sweet, still full of love despite the aches and pains of advanced age. Time, relentless and unstoppable, eventually claimed what it always claims. Harrison passed away in his sleep at the age of 78, with Lily beside him as he had been beside her for over 50 years. He went peacefully, his last words a whispered "I love you" to the woman who had saved his life and given him a reason to live it fully. Lily mourned him deeply, but without regret. They had been granted over half a century together, which was more than many people ever received. She lived another 5 years, surrounded by her children and grandchildren, still sharp and engaged with the world despite her loss. She told the story of the canteen often, wanting to make sure every generation understood where they came from and why compassion mattered. When she passed at 82, also peacefully in her sleep, the family buried her next to Harrison on a hill overlooking the ranch they had built together. The headstones were simple, just their names and dates, but beneath both epitaphs was the same inscription: "Love born of compassion, lasting beyond time." The ranch continued, passed down through generations just as they had planned. Their children managed it first, then their grandchildren, then great-grandchildren. Each generation heard the story of the canteen, of water shared in the desert, of promises kept and futures given. It became the foundation of the family identity, a reminder that their prosperity and success had roots in a single act of kindness. The story spread beyond the family too. It became one of those legends that people tell when they want to remember what the Old West was really about. Not just gunslingers and outlaws, but ordinary people making extraordinary choices. A woman who shared her water with a dying stranger. A man who spent his entire life repaying that debt with love and devotion. A ranch built on gratitude and sustained by generations who understood its origins. Years turned into decades, decades into a century. The Sutherland Ranch became a Montana landmark, still in family hands, still thriving. And in the main house, now preserved with historical care, a single artifact remained on display. A battered canteen, the very one Lily had used to give Harrison water that day in 1874. Visitors would pause before it, reading the plaque that told the story. Many were moved to tears by the simple romance of it, the proof that one person's choice could ripple forward through time, creating waves that never really stopped. The canteen sat in its glass case, a reminder that the greatest futures are often born in the smallest moments. That compassion is never wasted. That love, when given freely and nurtured carefully, can create legacies that outlast any single life. Harrison Sutherland had promised to give Lily Richardson his entire future that day in the desert. And he had kept that promise every day of his life, until his future became their present, and their present became the past that their descendants cherished. It was a love story born of necessity and desperation, nurtured by determination and devotion, and sustained by the unshakable belief that they had been meant to find each other. Two souls who saved each other in more ways than one, who built something beautiful from nothing, who proved that the best promises are the ones kept through action rather than words. Their story became legend, but the love was always real. As real as the Montana sky, as enduring as the mountains, as precious as water in the desert. And it all began the moment Lily Richardson chose compassion over caution, sharing her canteen with a dying stranger named Harrison Sutherland, giving him not just water, but an entire life still waiting to be lived.